UFOs in Greenland is a thing, I think, and there's something going on up there. There is a mountain up there in Greenland where they have persistent UAP sightings, and it goes on. I mean, it is a hotspot. We've had these drone incursions just south of Copenhagen here in the beginning of January.
And Elon's response is just, well, if I haven't seen it, then I would know. I've got top secret clearances, and I don't know. I just found that strange. Like
Hmm.
Elon must know that unless you've got a need to know, and there's
Yeah.
certain access wave programs where certain programs where you expected to lie about it, to keep the
Yeah.
program safe, and certain things that if you don't need to know, the fact that certain presidents haven't been told things or told the full story suggests that they probably wouldn't tell Elon,
Yeah.
just because he's got a rocket contract.
No, 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 no.
But
But I
yeah.
mean, anybody who would follow this subject would know that there's something going on. I mean, not everybody would come to the same conclusion, but most people would come to the conclusion that there is by now that there is some really, really advanced tech flying
Yeah.
around with impunity, and who owns this technology? I mean, not people. Most people would probably say it's human tech, but even in that case, I mean, who on earth owns this technology? I mean.
Yeah. The following is a conversation with the wonderful Frederik Uldall. Freddie is a passionate advocate for UAP transparency. He's the founder of the Danish Network for UAP Studies. Based in Denmark, Freddie has been at the forefront of efforts to bring serious attention to the UAP subject in Europe, working to bridge the gaps between scientific research, public awareness, and government transparency. Through his activism, Freddie has helped push the conversation forward, shining a light on UAP encounters beyond just the United States, showing that this is truly a global issue. He's also been closely following the mysterious drone incursions over Denmark, something we've seen reported in places like New Jersey and Lakenheath over here in the UK, and over Langley Air Force Base in the States for weeks on end. What's really going on? Well, we talk about it. Beyond that, Freddie's deeply interested in the historical connection between UFOs and nuclear sites, and we'll dive into that today too. Freddie's been around for a while and worked with and mingled with many of the best and most informed, from researchers to witnesses and insiders. People like Paul Hellyer, astronauts like Edgar Mitchell, and researchers and journalists like Richard Dolan, George Knapp. Freddie is now putting his efforts and expertise into a new endeavour to bridge the gap between science and academia with the Danish Network for UAP Studies, to bring science on board and destigmatise this subject with an emphasis on citizen science. A great conversation that I really, really enjoyed, and one that I think you will too, as well as finding valuable information. So, the following is a conversation with Frederik Uldell. Freddie, thanks so much for joining me. I really do appreciate it. It was great having a conversation with you yesterday, and I've been looking forward to getting on camera today and talking.
Uh,
It, if it's okay, I'd really like, I always like to get a bit of an idea of where people's interest first peaked in the subject, if they've been able to sort of trace it back to the beginnings, really. So, where's your interest come from, and have you been able to trace it back?
Yeah, I was actually thinking about this before our conversation, and the earliest thing I think I can remember was in 1987 when I was a teenager and I was watching a television show on Swedish TV. I am from Denmark, from Copenhagen, but we got Swedish TV at that moment, and there was a book review program, and I saw that with Strieber was on that with his communion book, and that made a huge impression on me because this was kind of the first serious uh, talk about non-human intelligence, and that made I thought it was really really scary. But I was a teenager, so I kind of put it in the back of my mind for many many years. And I think it was actually maybe in 2006. I just moved from India, where I was working for a year in a town called Gurgaon, which is right outside New Delhi, and I was working for a Danish IT company there. And I moved to London with my girlfriend there. I was living in Streatham Hill, just outside Brixton, and I came across the internet was fairly new at that moment. We didn't have that much bandwidth at the time, but I watched the Disclosure Project's press conference from 2001, which had been a few years before that.
Yeah.
And I saw all these military witnesses for the first time, and that also made a huge impression on me. Like in the seriousness of these witnesses, they came from all kinds of credible backgrounds and with high credentials, and it was very early on at that time. I mean, activism was not really rooted at that moment, but it caught on, and the Disclosure Project was really early on, and it has of course been criticized a lot since, and it was trying to maybe to do too many things at one time, but it was kind of an embryonic state of the activism at that point. And then I moved back to Denmark, and then I was fascinated by the activism that Stephen Bassett in Washington D.C. that what he was doing, and he was setting up this exopolitics world network. And I thought, okay, what about starting some activism in Denmark? That's not been done before. So I created something called Exopolitics Denmark, and exopolitics was really huge in relatively huge, of course, at that point of time in around 2007 and 8. And I went to a conference in Rome in 2007 where I met James Fox and Paola Harris, and they were really kind people and very serious. And James Fox, he had just maybe a few years before that released a documentary called Out of the Blue. And I asked James Fox, can I send this documentary to all the members of the Danish parliament and say, oh, yes, go ahead. So I bought this printer and started printing DVDs, which was the thing at the moment. They're long gone now, of course, where all the streaming. And of course, that was really a bit naive, but and really early on. And so but all the members of the Danish parliament, 179, they got a copy of Out of the Blue in 2008.
Wow.
But the point was also that I didn't really expect that many would react to it. But then you could go on shows and you could talk about it in the media that actually the Danish members of the Danish parliament had actually been informed about that there's something going on in our airspace. But then it caught on, this Exopolitics Denmark thing, and we got more and more members to this activist association. And we were a couple of people starting going to conferences abroad. So I went to Stephen Bassett's X-conference in Washington in 2008, 9, and 10. And with Robert Fleischer from Exo Magazine TV, which is a huge podcast now in Germany, and he's really doing a great job down there, and it's actually still going on. But I became friends with Robert, and he taught me a lot about like producing and recording videos. We recorded a lot of those videos at these X conferences, and interviewed Edgar Mitchell and Paul Hillier and some of these, Jesse Marcel and also Paola Harris. She was very kind to us newcomers. Everybody in this field, they step into the field at some point in time in history when the subject is in some kind of maturity stage. But so much has been going on ever since that time. But then we started, after going to these conferences abroad, also to I think it actually Exopolitics peaked around 2009 in my impression. There was a huge conference, about 1,010 attendees in Sitges in Barcelona in Spain, where Stephen Greer was there, and Stephen Bassett, and Brian O'Leary, the astronaut, and Nick Pope, and a lot of the names at the time. And then we came back to Copenhagen, and we became more and more members in our association, and I think we started inviting international people to Denmark. Now we had been abroad, and now we were inviting the people here. So we invited people like George Knapp and Jeremy Corbell, and one of my favorites, Robert Hastings, because I'm very interested in the UFOs and nukes connection, but also A.J. Javard from Brazil. May he rest in peace, and Robbie Graham and Mary Rodwell and Susan Hansen and Gary Heseltine from the UK. And then I think I got the UFO fatigue or the UAP burnout.
Yeah.
As some people talk about. Sometimes I can register when listening to podcasts. I know that Jeremy Corbell and George Knapp, they have also had an episode talking about UFO burnout. And I had to take a break for a couple of years from the subject, but it's not a subject that you can you can just leave. I mean,
Yeah.
this is a lifetime passion for me, and I know Stephen Bassett. He's also talked about this. I mean, you cannot just leave the subject; it just sticks with you. It's not possible. So, but of course, I think now I have a more relaxed and a more comfortable interaction with the subject. But I do follow it a lot, and there's a lot going on now. And at the moment, with all these drone incursions, maybe because there have been drone sightings in Denmark as well, I'm trying to set up a new initiative, which is really not an activist initiative. It's a research network, actually. It's called the Danish Network for UAP Studies. And I mean, contrary to the activist organization I started before, this is more a scholarly network, and which doesn't have any opinions. I mean, it's just a forum, a meeting room. I'm trying to set up with some other people here in Denmark, where scholars and students in Denmark will hopefully come in and give presentations to each other and discuss how we can address this UAP subject scholarly and use the scientific method. So what I expect is that people will not always agree in this forum, but it's not really my role to give my opinion, or I have my own opinions, and I have been an activist for years, but there are also people coming in who don't share my thoughts. And I think this is really healthy, and I think this is actually the moment in history where we can start dealing with the subject in an academic setting. And I know there is a course for students in Linköping University in a couple of months, and there's also something called Durham Law School, I think, in Britain, which is also setting up a symposium here in April. And of course, it's setting up this Danish network for UAP studies has only been possible because we can stand on the shoulders on other initiatives and really show that, like, now we have kind of the sole foundation closely affiliated to Stanford University, and we have the SCU and UAPX and all these academic initiatives starting up, and the Avi Loeb's Galileo project. So we can show that actually people abroad academics and scholars abroad are actually starting to take this subject seriously. We can study it with the scientific method, and it has to be cross-disciplinary. There are so many facets and aspects connected with this subject, so we cannot just deal with it kind of with physics. We also have to deal it within the humanities and social sciences and so on. So this is kind of the new project that I'm starting up, and we're setting up this advisory board at the moment and trying to get people to join our initiative to set up these symposiums or meetings between scholars and students and to pique their interest.
Superb. Well, I mean, we keep hearing this thing about everything being in America and there's not much abroad, and we don't, it's just, I'm constantly talking about this is the algorithm, and we're, a prime example. You're from Denmark, I'm from the UK, and we're here talking about the subject, just setting up a network, and it's great to hear. What sort of work are you doing so it's the Danish Network for UAP Studies, is that right? Or
Yes,
Studies
yes.
of UAP. So where would people find that, and what sort of things will we see if we go and check you guys out, and how can we get involved?
I must say, this is a very, very new initiative. It started last month, so the page has just been set up. So it's called dnus.dk, Danish Network for UAP Studies. So what you'll see there is actually just that we are a couple of people there. We're trying to assemble an advisory board, and we have the ambition of talking about or setting up some events, like some academic events, some symposiums and some presentations, but we are not there yet. I mean, Denmark has not really started doing this at all, actually, to my knowledge. So, but somebody has to be the first to do stuff. So,
yeah, absolutely.
so it's catching on a little bit in abroad, but in Denmark, it's only just starting up now, I would say. So, but there will probably will find our website, and there will probably, hopefully, be people at University of Copenhagen and other academic institutions in Denmark, people all over the place saying, okay, I'm interested in this. How can we approach this subject with the scientific method, and using all the kinds of the academic bells and whistles and peer review and criticism and playing devil's advocate and all these things that are present in science. How can we approach this subject in a scientific way? And so this is a moment where it can start, I think, with all the things that have been happening also in the United States, of course, with all this legislation and the whistleblowers and the congressional hearings, and academics have come to realize that, okay, there is something going on there. And I think that many scholars, if they look at it and investigate it, they will come to the conclusion that there is a there, as Eric Davis, the astrophysicist, he says, there is a there. But what is it? I mean, they will probably suspend that judgment or that conclusion and say, okay, there is something there, but let's study it. There's no reason not to study it. Even let's say that we just come to the conclusion that there's nothing there. That would also be interesting because there's so much fuss going and hype going on. So,
yeah. It's interesting. You mentioned a few of those names there, and there's a couple. I think potentially the person that you'd mentioned from Durham University. I'm speaking to them fairly soon, and a few others. I'm working on a documentary at the moment with lots of different people, mainly from the UK, trying to get an idea of what's happening in academia and science. And there's such a rich history of ufology or whatever you want to call it over here, and I'm sure it's the same pretty much everywhere in the world. But one thing I did find really difficult was to try and find politicians prepared to talk to me, prepared to go on, on the record, not necessarily to say their opinion or what they think, but just to talk about the subjects in general. What's happening in politics? How do we talk about the subjects? Is the stigma still there? That sort of thing. Are you finding it similar in Denmark? I mean,
it's very difficult to get Danish politicians to address this topic. I mean, now I mentioned before in 2008 they all got James Fox's documentary, but maybe somebody in Denmark I'm urging somebody to do the same thing, maybe with sending them the program or maybe this Age of Disclosure, the next documentary, to kind of pique their interest. And I'm aware of one politician who has been on a Danish podcast talking about UFOs, and our Minister of Defense has been asked about it, and she was kind of very evasive and said there's nothing going on. So it's not a thing among Danish politicians, and I know it is a thing in the United States at the moment, but you and we're also very, very focused on that UAP caucus and Anna Paulina Looney and Rich Burchett and Chuck Schumer and all these people. I mean, but I guess that is also, it doesn't, it's not a big thing in the United States yet. I mean, we're just very, very focused on. There is, of course, some significant things going on in the United States. They have had those hearings, and that was unheard of like 10 or 15 years ago. I remember when Stephen Bassett put on this mock-up hearing in the National Press Club in 2013, and that was kind of just a dress rehearsal for what is actually going on now. But that's how it develops, and I expect that we will at some point have Danish politicians having to answer questions about UAP and UFOs, especially maybe in relation to Greenland, which is part of the Danish kingdom, and Greenland has been in the media a lot in Denmark at the moment because Donald Trump's son went to Greenland, and Donald Trump uttered that he wanted to purchase Greenland, which Danes and Greenlanders have thought, okay, this is absolutely nuts. And there was this petition that was made in Denmark where the Danes, they signed a petition about buying California, right? But UFOs in Greenland is a thing, I think, and there's something going on up there. There is a mountain up there in Greenland where they have persistent UAP sightings, and it goes on. I mean, it is a hotspot, and we haven't really got a good explanation of what is going on there, and because the phenomenon keeps turning up there in Greenland. So I think in relation to Denmark and UAP sightings, there is something going on in Greenland, and then we've had these drone incursions just south of Copenhagen here in the beginning of January. I think it was around the 3rd or the 4th of January. There was a guy named Alexander, and he was in Køge, which is this town 30 kilometers south of Copenhagen. There's a port, and he observed maybe around 20 drones during the late night flying, and he near this marina, a port that is a fairly large port in Denmark. And he called the police, and the police came, and the police, they managed to see 4 of the drones before they flew out into the Baltic Sea at a high rate of speed. Wow. So there's been a lot of speculation on what is actually going on there. It was reported to the police and the defense authorities. They kind of said, okay, this is a local police thing. I mean, they didn't get involved in it. So what was happening there? Was it really planes going into the Copenhagen airport? I don't know. It possibly, but it doesn't sound like it from the description of what was going on. Of course, and there's not really any, to my knowledge, critical military presence there at that port. Every once in a while, there is a military presence there when they kind of ship things, military equipment into the Baltic Sea, into Estonia and these places from these NATO things, but they will only kind of rent the harbor for a short period of time and then it will be gone again. But of course, I mean, the Baltic Sea is a strategic area. I mean, it's Russian ships. They pass through the Straits of Denmark to get into the North Sea and into the Atlantic. It's one of the places where the Russians can get into the Atlantic Ocean, and the other way is all the way north of Norway and Murmansk and that area up there. So it is a strategic area, and there have been these cuts of cables in the Baltic Sea quite recently. So what is going on there? These drone incursions in Denmark, what are they about? I don't know, but it's safe to say that these things are happening all over the world at the moment, not just in New Jersey or in England and at Langley Air Force Base. Now we also recently heard about this Plant 42 that Chris Sharp from the UK and George Knapp reported about in Palmdale in California. So we haven't really got an explanation for these drone sightings. So yeah, who knows what it is.
And unlikely to be FAA approved research drones, as the Trump administration sort of suggested, rather hilariously, I think.
Yeah.
I mean, it doesn't seem to make sense. It was quite interesting that some of these were sort of strategic nuclear sites. I mean, we know that Lakenheath was certainly rumored to have taken on some nuclear materials not that long ago, and then that was an interesting, of all of the Royal Air Force bases in the UK, that one being targeted. We know that it's the Americans are there and they're stationed there, but I found that really interesting. I know that you're quite interested in the nuclear connection.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Where did your interest in that start, and what have you found?
I think that my interest was really, really heightened when Robert Hastings was here in 2013. I mean, he gave the presentation here in Copenhagen, and I talked a little bit about it on Danish TV and mentioned the Malmström incident. But I kind of dove into the subject after he left us, and I think that it's really, really interesting. And when you dive into it, it's so much. There's just so much smoke that there has to be a fire somewhere.
Absolutely.
I mean, these incidents have been taking place not just around these ICBM sites in the United States during the 60s and the 70s, but also all the way back to 1945 at the Hanford plutonium enrichment plant in Washington State and Los Alamos when they were developing it, and into the Sandia National Labs where they were assembling it. Robert Hastings, by the way, was born in Sandia, which is really, really interesting. And Oak Ridge National Labs, where there's so many things that kind of fit together. This Oak Ridge which is also where Jim Burchett and Andy Ogles and these politicians were they're from, and Sean Kirkpatrick, who later got a job at Oak Ridge National Labs, and these UFO sightings, mysterious. I mean, and Savannah River plant, and all these nuclear tests in the Pacific Ocean around the Marshall Islands, and the ships transporting the nukes to these Marshall Islands were also buzzed by UAP all the way back. So when you hear about these drone sightings today over all these sensitive military installations, I mean, some of them are clearly drones. We know that. I mean, man-made drones, because law enforcement are sending them up, and some of them could actually look like really, really advanced human tech. But it's probably, in my... I don't know what it is, but it sounds like it's a mixed phenomenon. I think we hear about these orb-like phenomena. Also, these two guys, the Tedesco brothers on Long Island, who have this nightcrawler, this van with all this nice equipment. They're looking at it and say there are some anomalies and some oddities with this phenomena. But they're also seeing like normal drones. So it's kind of. And I think it was Louis Elizondo who mentioned that if you really want to confuse or mix mix up this whole thing. There may be some NHI craft moving around, and then you're sending up drones, normal drones, and you could just say everything is drones.
Yeah.
So you have to really have to use your discernment here. But the fact is that these incursions, whatever they are, have been going on since the 40s, even earlier, since the Foo Fighters, since the Second World War, and this is what's always driven my passion, is that there is an elephant in the room. There is something that we need to address. There's something that's been swept under the rug for decades, and now, I mean, we're starting in the small just to address this, and I think this is really, really interesting.
Yeah, yeah, you make the good point. I mean, we talk about things now, and it's highly probable that there's all sorts of things all going on at once that are either intentional or unintentional. Like we know that Russia sort of test air defenses, and they sort of play a little bit with us, and China as well. And so of course, they would also have some sort of Russian, perhaps, or Chinese technology, playing around in the skies. Of course, we have hobbyist drones. Of course, we're going to be researching our own type of drones, and you've got to test it somewhere. So there's going to be all of that mixed in together, and potentially the non-human intelligence side of it as well. But as you say, we're going back to the 40s or 50s, and Allied forces with the Foo Fighters. Like we're still getting that today. Every time an orb type object is seen in the sky, we're hearing, certainly from some of the sort of hyper skeptics, everything's a Starlink flare, or everything's some form of satellite. Okay, maybe, but what were the Foo Fighters back in the World War II and stuff? And so you've got to sort of have a step back, haven't you, and go, look, there's a lot going on, and it's really hard to separate things and categorize things, and it does make it really complicated. And I guess from a counterintelligence perspective, if you're that way inclined, it's really easy, isn't it? Just throw some stuff up and go, oh, no, you're just looking at this. It's almost too easy for them and too hard for us.
Yeah,
puts us on the back foot on that one. Yeah, fascinating though. Certainly when it comes to the UK, from my perspective, like Lakenheath's not that far away, and I talked to two of the witnesses. So they were the plane spotters. There are two guys that were down there that just filmed the aircraft, and they're really fascinated in aircraft. One of them's a pilot himself, goes out filming them, and all of a sudden, out of nowhere, these strange drone type objects start appearing, but also strange lights in the sky that didn't appear to be drones, that appeared to be some kind of orbs, and they're trying to capture them on camera, but they're set up for daytime filming, and you're looking at lights in the sky that are doing interesting movements.
What was that on that YouTube channel that was pulled down later, or
that was
it? That was it.
Yeah, there's two of them. There's a guy called Dad Rants, as in Rants, Rants. But he was a pilot. He had a sort of a medical issue where he couldn't fly anymore, but really fascinated in aircraft. Took his kids, I think, to go and look at the aircraft, and lived literally over the Royal Air Force, airspace, essentially in right next door. And so he would go along and film some of the fighter jets, and loved it. And then all of a sudden, he starts seeing all this really strange stuff and starts filming and putting it online. And the same with the guy that who you just mentioned, that took his YouTube account down. It sort of disappeared for a day or two, and then he started again. He was called, I think, Liberty Wing. I think he was called Liberty Wing UK.
That was it.
Yeah. And it's exactly the same for him. He's seeing these strange things, and you couldn't get much more of an expert witness, somebody who spends the entire, all of their entire spare time just looking from that spot, looking at the aircraft that are in the sky over this Royal Air Force base, and just sees everything's changed. Something's really strange. There's a load of activity. There's these weird things in the sky. Got some interesting footage, but
and I think it's really, really interesting that this citizen science is also catching on. I mean, I love those Tedesco brothers in Long Island. I mean, all this equipment that they have. I mean, and they're just really, really down to earth, and it just they know what they're talking about. I mean, and then you have this guy from England who's going around Lakenheath.
That's what I feel like. That's what we need. I feel like we're so reliant upon the government, and I keep saying this, that we're so reliant on the government, and it's like not their job. Like we want them to be open with us. We want transparency. We want disclosure of some form from them, but their core function is just protect the country and just
Yeah,
have military superiority over everybody else. It's not to tell you about the meaning of life or to tell you about life after
exactly.
death or, So whilst they should tell us if it really affects us, we can't rely on them.
No.
And it's down to us. It's down to you and me, and it's down to the guys at Lake and Heath. It's down to the Tedesco brothers. It's down to the Soul Foundation, Galileo Project, and all of these amazing organizations. Tedesco brothers are brilliant. They're so cool. I mean, I interviewed them before, and
Ah, okay, great.
immediately I just wanted to. I was like, right, I'm going to go and buy. I'm going to find a way to buy like a 4x4 off-roader. I'm going to put telescopes on the roof. I'm going to have sonar. I'm going to,
Full on.
yeah. And then I realized that okay, I haven't got a spare £10,000 to, to buy all this kit. I mean, it would probably be more than that, but even,
Yeah, yeah.
just trying to
But
get the cheapest.
but the sensors of all the military jets are getting better, but the sensors of the public is also getting
Yeah.
better, right?
Yeah.
So I mean, as a
Yeah.
and many of the skeptical scientists, they say, okay, there's no data, there's no data. Actually, there is a lot of data if you look for it. So
Yeah.
it's really really interesting, I think. So I think more scientists will hop on the bandwagon and start doing research, and we'll see the disappearance of this invisible college and getting a more visible college talking about this. Maybe in 10, 20 years, this will be much more mainstream than it is now. I think it's a natural progression, I think.
Yeah, and we're moving so quickly already, aren't we? I mean, I'm
Oh,
trying to think back to when the first congressional, not the first congressional hearing, but the sort of recent set of congressional hearings, maybe 2021, 2022, when we
yeah.
saw initially, I think it was Scott Bray, I want to say, or where they had that really
Yes,
terrible
yes, yes, yes,
cell
yes,
phone
yes.
footage, and then we got David Grush in the next one. Thinking back to where we are now to where we were then, it was just a polar opposites. There's
Yeah.
so many more people engaged in the public and the
Yes.
media and celebrities and politicians and
And podcasts.
podcasts, yeah, and people
Yeah.
just communicating across the world about ideas and information.
It,
Yeah,
and it, and it's impossible to keep up with all the news that's going on in the UFO UAP field. I mean, in the zeros, there were long pauses of it.
yeah,
Nothing was happening on, and then you would see something on CNN, and you would think, "Oh, there's something on television.
yeah, yeah,
Record it and put it on YouTube."
yeah.
But now it's just you can't keep up with everything. It's impossible.
Yeah, it's wonderful, isn't it? There's
Yeah,
so
yeah,
much
yeah.
out there, and so much, especially when you're really engaged in it, and your algorithm just shows you what's coming out. And so, I mean, we would get more than most people, I guess, because we're really focused on it. So our algorithm is going to go, "Oh, you're
Yeah.
interested in this? Have a look at this." But you'll see it on online with some of the politicians when they post about the subject of UFO UAP. They'll get huge views and
Mm.
responses and likes and comments, and then they'll post something about policy that's unrelated or something else that's not UAP related, and it's sort of very very low figures, low responses. So it's showing them, okay, well, this is popular, this is what I should talk about. And I
Yeah.
suppose people that are in that field where popularity is important, you've got to be re-elected, you've got to all that sort
Yeah.
of stuff, it's important. So that's good because it's like, well,
And
maybe
you
you should cover this subject because people are interested in it.
Yeah, absolutely. Actually, you can win voters now by talking
Mm,
about this. I mean, this was not the case in the 90s. Then they just people will not touch it with a 10 feet pole. I mean, it was just a career killer talking about UFOs. But now it's a different story. I mean, people will say, "Ah, there's somebody talking about it. They will be interested." And yeah, I think people. Politicians have something to gain by talking about this subject now to a much larger extent than earlier.
yeah, absolutely. Oh, that's
And
good.
and and one thing I think is really really interesting as well, which people are not talking so much about, is this technology. We had this UAPDA, this UAP Disclosure Act, which was kind of gutted, and it was in 2023. A little bit of it was actually approved and signed and signed by Biden, but then the next year it was didn't get into this manager's package and was not really get, was not signed. But there was this eminent domain thing in it about, and this is, I thought was really really interesting, where the politicians, they were kind of trying to get the tech out of these defense contractors, that they should now be handed back to the authorities. And just putting that in there in some real legislation, I thought was really really interesting. And that maybe, in my mind, signals that somebody is now behind the scenes struggling to control this, the ownership of this technology, and who is going to profit from this technology in the future. I think this will be maybe in 10 years time, there will be, maybe it's already happening now, who's going to own it. I mean, are the tech billionaires like Elon Musk and Peter Thiel and people like that, do they want to profit from it in the future? Because we heard this story about this divestment that Lockheed Martin wanted to divest the craft to the OSAP project, and are somebody trying to get their hands on it and through this reverse engineering trying to profit from it in the future, so they can earn money from people, from these flying cars that will maybe be produced in 50 years time or something like that. So I think this is really interesting. But as the world is at the moment, releasing this technology into the public sphere is too risky at the moment, I think. But that definitely some people, I think some of the driving forces in the United States for getting this technology out is that the secrecy has kind of been so hampering for the research project. I mean, scientists, they want to share ideas and talk to each other in an open and free environment. That's how science it thrives. But there's been so many resources spent on keeping this secret, and people and scientists cannot. They're so compartmentalized and stovepiped, so they cannot talk to each other and develop it. So now they're afraid of kind of the Chinese getting ahead of them. So they have to disclose this in some fashion and in some to some degree to get it out for like civil scientists to investigate this technology and see how the Americans, maybe also the Europeans, they can profit from the technology and maybe put it out into the public sphere in kind of in a responsible way that will not be too dramatic.
Yeah, yeah. We were talking the other day about this imminent domain stuff with such a big response from some people that there wasn't really an expectation that there would be a response. You know, it was really strange. It was very telling, wasn't it? That
Yeah.
the UAP Disclosure Act and all of these different things that were in there, and we thought, oh, that's massive. That's really really interesting. And then this imminent domain thing, and that was like one of the key pieces of the legislation that people were very, very, they're really pushing against, and people that you wouldn't necessarily expect. And yeah, so that was really telling. Well, if there's nothing there, why, you don't have to hand anything over, do you?
Yeah.
So
Then what's the problem?
yeah, what's the problem? You haven't got any technology to hand over. Why are you worried about handing it over?
Yeah.
Unless you've got some technology to hand over, or you've got something. So that
Swept
was really
under the rug,
interesting.
yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think that I was just seeing small signs of the other day. I saw that there was it's a company called Tuttle Capital, and the CEO called Matthew Tuttle. He has kind of applied to create an exchange traded fund, an ETF, which kind of if this instrument, I mean, it's a financial instrument, like you purchase it just like you buy equities or bonds or something like that. And if it goes up, I mean, it's because there have been some underlying companies like defense contractors who are expected to profit from UFO technology. And then it shorts other companies that might lose because maybe it could be like oil industry or something like that. That would go the other way in the market if this gets out. So it's not an ETF that has been approved yet, but I think just it's very interesting and telling that there are some people in the financial markets who are actually saying,
Yeah.
if the government discloses this technology, if this is highly speculative, of course, but if it exists, I mean, then it can mean huge impact on the world's financial system and our economies. I mean, it's a completely different world we're looking at with like kind of 3-digit growth, and it's almost impossible to comprehend the business opportunity and the money involved in this. So like just applying for an ETF that's got the ticker UFOD. I mean, and you can purchase this this
Yeah.
financial instrument on like purchasing like Tesla shares or whatever you buy. I mean, this I think it's not certain that it will be approved. But I just thought they caught my eye. So, that's
Yeah.
interesting.
Yeah, definitely interesting. We do see quite a lot of these ex-intelligence officers and people that were involved in the science side of this from years back, starting to form companies or joining companies that are very focused on R&D and research and development and sort of around this sort of subject. You think That's interesting. If people are
Yeah,
pumping a lot of money, and they don't give away money for nothing,
yeah.
there's something there that they're interested in, certainly to profit from.
Yeah.
Money
Elon
and
Musk,
power.
absolutely. Elon Musk has not been very, he's not talked much about UFOs when he's been, not very much, but I kind of had a feeling that he must know about it. I mean, I don't know.
Yeah, I
Yeah,
saw.
he
I,
must
I
know.
watched. I watched him on Joe Rogan. I think it was yesterday or day
Yeah, yeah, so I
before.
haven't seen it. What did he
Yeah,
say?
he says the same sort of thing over and over. Where Joe said to him, like, there's what do you say about these pilots, these trained professionals that are seeing these things, and there's really unique stuff and radar jamming and stuff's caught on camera. And his response was, well, is it HD? But are they catching this footage in HD? And Joe's like, well, maybe certain people in the government are saying, Chris Mellon, for example, is saying, look, there is high definition footage, but they're not releasing it. And Elon's response is just, well, if I haven't seen it, then I would know. I've got top secret clearances, and I don't know. I just found that strange. Like
Hmm.
Elon must know that unless you've got a need to know, and there's
Yeah.
certain access wave programs where certain programs where you expected to lie about it, to keep the
Yeah.
program safe, and certain things that if you don't need to know, the fact that certain presidents haven't been told things or told the full story suggests that they probably wouldn't tell Elon,
Yeah,
just
yeah.
because he's got a rocket contract.
No, 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 no.
But
But I
yeah.
mean, anybody who would follow this subject would know that there's something going on. I mean, not everybody would come to the same conclusion, but most people would come to the conclusion that there is by now that there is some really, really advanced tech flying
Yeah.
around with impunity, and who owns this technology? I mean, not people. Most people would probably say it's human tech, but even in that case, I mean, who on earth owns this technology? I mean.
Yeah. Yeah,
They're,
exactly.
they're, they're not sharing it with me and you. I mean, we're not
Mm.
flying, crossing the Atlantic Ocean using that technology. Somebody are using it. Who is
Yeah,
that? Who is it?
absolutely. And how do they have the right to keep technology? If we've got technology that's that powerful that could heat the world for,
Mm,
really potentially a really low cost that could be get us on our holidays in, 1 minute we're in America or 1 minute we're in Denmark or
yeah, yeah.
wherever, just this incredible technology that's going to heat the world. And why are you keeping it secret? Why are you, you
Yeah,
know?
and I also wondered about all the
Mm,
environmental organizations, all the movements, climate activists. They don't seem to know about it, that this
mm,
technology exists.
yeah.
It's
Yeah.
it's not running on fossil fuels. I mean,
Mm. Yeah, yeah, yeah,
But as soon as people they start to realize that somebody has their hand in the cookie jar and the rest of us we don't have. I mean, there are some really really privileged, let's say maybe entities or people or who have something that the rest of us don't have. I
yeah,
mean, I think it was Louis Lasonde who made the analogy of there is this kind of a sandbox filled with children, and maybe one or two of the children in the corner, they have been supplied with some really really interesting fancy toy, and all the other kids they are not allowed to play with this toy. I mean, and
yeah,
now all the other kids, huh? What's the toy that they got?
yeah,
Why don't we get to play with it, right? So
yeah.
yeah.
Or even know about it. I think I was having this conversation with a friend of mine a few days ago that there's this narrative that everybody that's ex-intelligence agent is like a misinformation agent or
Mm.
is on the nasty side of the subject where they're just trying to profit from something or they're trying to misdirect so that we don't figure it out. And I remember thinking, like, human psychology, if you're involved in the intelligence community and there's something a bit deeper than your clearance level and you want to know about it, but you're not in the circle of trust or you've not got a need to know, there's going to be something deep inside you that's thinking, I want to know what this is.
Mm.
And that could be a real motivating factor to trying to push for disclosure rather than just being, look, I'm a misinformation agent. Maybe they
Yeah.
genuinely just want to know what this stuff is because they've been close to knowing, but
Yeah.
then, like for example with Louis Elizondo, where he's pretty high up, but he's facing blocks in the road with people saying, well, you don't need to know that, or I'm not going to tell you. The same with David Grush, where he's
Exactly.
trying to
Yeah.
find things, but people are sort of standing in his way. Like, maybe these guys just want to know what the hell is going on because I do. It's human nature
Yeah.
to go,
Yeah.
I want to know, and I've only been given small pieces of the puzzle, and they've been given much bigger pieces of the puzzle. So it must be even more frustrating being so close and then retiring or then, coming out and still not quite knowing. That's just a just a thought, but there's human psychology is so complex that there could
And
be multiple things at play.
and even the people who have those clearances, maybe that know a lot about this, they don't have the full picture. I mean,
Yeah,
I don't think that anybody has the full picture of this. Is just so fragmented. Somebody knows something over here, and somebody knows something over here. I mean, it's just a big jigsaw puzzle, and you have to put all these pieces together. And maybe there's some fake pieces in there as well, and a lot of pieces missing. I mean, I think it was Richard Dolan who made that analogy once about this jigsaw puzzle that you have to piece together. So I think that people like Louis Elizondo and David Grush are doing a fantastic job. But of course, they don't know anything, but everything. But they do know a lot more
yeah,
than we know, because it's not all that has gone through the stop-step review that they're not allowed to talk about
yeah,
everything.
yeah,
But let's see. I think it was Anna Paulina Luna who just announced recently. Was that correct? That you want to
yeah.
bring
Task
in
force.
the task force, that she wanted to bring in the Arrow
Mm.
and Grush and Elizondo into a skiff, and kind of
Yeah,
get
let
them
them
get them
battle
on
it
the same
out.
page.
Yeah, yeah. I think she
Yeah,
was talking about a temporary reading for David Grush to get his sort of clearances back temporarily
yeah,
for like a skiff briefing type thing. I
yeah.
think that'd be great. I mean, I know that politics is so polarizing, and people will. It's frustrating for me because I'm in the UK and I don't really know about American politics. I know that there's you either love or hate somebody, and if you're on a different side, but I look at it purely from the UAP perspective, and if somebody's saying something positive about UAP, it's like great, I'll champion that. That's really good.
Yeah.
But then other people say, yeah, but they're saying this about this thing that I don't like. I'm like,
Yeah,
okay, but if we like all of the personalities and the policies of everybody that we're going to follow, then we're going to follow nobody. There's
exactly.
nobody
Yeah,
left to
yeah, yeah.
follow because everybody's going to have something you don't agree with. And it's like we've got to have some people on the inside that we at least trust a bit to
Yeah.
support to push things forward.
And I think it's really important to focus on all our similarities. I mean, Danny Sheehan, he was been on several podcasts where he's asked about Greer and Elizondo, that they don't agree and they're
Mm.
fighting. And he says most of the things actually Greer and Elizondo, they agree on, like
Yeah.
75 or 80% of everything. And then there's maybe 10 or 20% that they don't agree on. And so what? We're not there. I mean, let's focus on what brings people together. And I think that's really important also in the UFO community, and not because some people they do podcasts, some other people they are researchers, they do books, and somebody is an activist, but let's just, I mean,
Yeah, 100%.
try to be nice to each other.
Yeah,
And
it's a really
yeah,
good
yeah,
point. You make a great point,
yeah.
and we saw that with the UAP caucus with people from the Democrats and people from the Republicans, and they were it's one of the first times that we've seen in
Yes,
American politics where you've got bipartisan support, and you've got people from the Republican Party and Democrats going, no, I agree with what you're saying, and no, I agree with what you're
yeah,
saying. That's
exactly.
great. Let's do that.
Yeah,
It's bringing people together. It was really positive to
yeah,
see
yeah.
because you just don't see that in American politics.
No,
In
as I
politics, most places, but certainly not America. It's great.
absolutely. People also always refer to this, that at Matt Gaetz and AOC, they were in the same room, and they were
Yeah.
not, and
Yeah.
they were not
Polar
fight.
opposite about everything else,
Yeah,
always
exactly.
arguing, just
Except this,
yeah,
brought
which is
together. Yeah.
and that's a really good sign. It's bringing it's bringing these people together. Excuse me.
And this subject has the potential to do that, because there is some otherness here. I mean, I'm 100% sure that that's my conviction. I mean, there is somebody here that's not us.
Yeah.
I mean, we can discuss who it is. I mean, that it may have all kinds of different explanations, but my assessment is, after all these years, I mean, there's just too much smoke. There is somebody here that's not us, and that has the potential, of course, we could launch a war against that otherness and see it as a threatening other, or we could see it something that really unites us. But I think that we as humanity, we have to get our act together and be kind to each other, and kind of settle most of our differences, and just accept and respect our differences. And it's more or less at that point, I think, that open contact with this otherness can occur in a fruitful and constructive manner, and in a positive way, when we kind of lay aside many of these differences that are between us, because we got so much. I mean, there's different sides of the political spectrum. There are religions that are separating people. There are racial issues, and there are gender issues, about sexuality, all kinds of. We focus on all these differences between us, but we're all human beings, right? So, and so let's try to be nice to each other, and then maybe we can meet this otherness.
Yeah, I love
Yeah,
it. I love it.
yeah. That's the kind of my hippie thought about this.
Yeah, yeah, no, that's it's beautiful. I love it.
Yeah.
I think that's how we should be seeing things and thinking about things. If people are new to this subject, and we do get people that have either had an interest in the subject for a very long time, but it's sort of a step back and they're not really so much involved in it. They're just an observer. Whereas other people that are getting into it and want to be more involved and want to help. And we were talking earlier about, this sort of citizen journalism and citizen science. And if people want to get involved in that, what advice would you give, or do you see a way that people that are fairly new to the subject that want to get more involved and help more with the puzzle pieces, what can they do?
I think, I mean, if getting a little bit up on the learning curve is maybe to watch, I mean, these James Fox documentaries. I think they're really, really good, and he's been at it for a long time. And I mean, they're really, really, really well put together. And it introduces people to a lot of different UFO cases, like this moment of contact in Brazil, and we got the Rendlesham Forest incident, and all these incidents, also all these cases about UFOs and nukes. But after that, I think if people want to get involved, maybe, for example, if you're in the United States, a New Paradigm Institute, I mean, Danish Institute, or the activism that's going on in the United States, I think they're searching for people to help them out with activism. But I also think that here in Europe, I'm not so much involved in activism anymore. I mean, only on a personal level. But people can start like forming groups and putting forward questions to journalists and politicians and pushing in that way. And I know that this disclosure initiative is also going on also in Europe. I know you want to put the focus on Europe as well, and we had this also in the European Union. And maybe last year there was a Portuguese politician who had this meeting. Francisco, exactly, which was really, really good. I mean, hats off. I mean, excellent. Also talking about how we can address this in the European Union and gathering data and putting in shared databases where we can share the data. Researchers can access this data. I think this is also a way that you can contribute to this field. You can do it by activism like I've done in the past, but now I'm moving more into engaging with scientists. So if you are a scientist, if you are a PhD student or a master student or maybe a full professor somewhere, and you want to contribute to this, I mean, you can do it and still kind of abide to all the rules that have been set up in science, which I think should be followed, because then you will also kind of keep the legitimacy of science, because there is a problem that science maybe has been sleeping in the classroom for several decades, and I think that maybe science is also one of the ways to get disclosure, that actually scientists are publishing more and more peer-reviewed papers, actually demonstrating they can actually deal with the subject in a scientific way. So that's also a way to contribute to this. So it can be on many different levels. Host a screening of a documentary in your own town and in your own city. Gather some of your friends for a movie night at home, watching a documentary, having a discussion about it. I mean, it's lots of ways.
Yeah, great advice. I got a message last night from Amir from Yes Theory. And he said,
I met him.
He said that.
He's a really nice guy. I love him.
Yeah, well, he said the same. So he sent me a message. I mentioned that I was going to be talking to you today. He messaged me and said, I love that guy. I met him in Copenhagen. I was like, cool.
With Jesse Michaels. Yeah, we had a great time.
Yeah. He's a lot of fun, isn't he?
I love Amar and Jesse. They're so kind. I mean, they're great fun.
Yeah, and they're doing some great work. I mean, Jesse, both of them are, but Jesse especially, some of the stuff that he's coming out with at the moment, some of the,
it's unbelievable. Yeah. Excellent.
Really
I mean,
stuff.
He's really, really productive at the moment, and I think he's doing a fantastic job. I mean, he just interviewed also Jake Barber here a month ago or something like that. In a really, really nice setting near the ocean, and a lot of good stuff. Yeah.
I'm
Yeah.
looking forward to seeing
High
what else.
production value as well.
Yeah, I mean, I
Yeah.
mean, you're sitting there watching it. When I'm editing my stuff, I'm like, oh, I wish I could do that. I don't know how they
Yeah.
do it.
But what it all comes down to in the end, it's the content
Yeah.
and it's the subject and the conversations, and is it contributing something valuable to the audience? I think that is what it's about. Of course, it's nice to have a nice setting and nice equipment, but yeah. But so happy that you talked to the S theory guy. To him.
Yeah,
Yeah,
he's
yeah.
cool. He's cool.
Amaya, that's his
Yeah,
name.
yeah,
Amaya.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. He's cool. Nice one. Look, Freddie, I'm really conscious of your time. I really appreciate
Yes.
you talking to me today, and it's been a lot of fun and really informative. And I hope that we stay in touch and we have another
Absolutely.
conversation in the not too distant future.
And thanks so much for having me on the show. It was a pleasure.
Well, pleasure's all mine. Take
Yeah.
care of yourself, and we'll
Take
speak
care,
again
man.
soon.
Take care. Bye bye. Bye
Take care.
bye.
Bye now.
Bye.
Cheers.